Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to another animation reaction and breakdown. Today I've got a shorter one. I've had a lot going on in my personal life and my schedule's gotten a little tight, so this week I'm just going to be taking it slow and soft, get a small animation out. So this is the Arknights special for Siracusano. So I figured this one would be the best one to go for and you guys would get the most benefit out of, assuming there's something within this time period that actually is worth talking about. But we're about to find out, aren't we? So let's go!
I used to think everything about this place was carved in stone.
Didn't expect the voices, to be honest. Ooh, okay. They still got the style on lock here.
You don't get to just wage your way out. That goes for all of us.
Oh.
In Siracusa, the rain washes away the blood.
Ooh. Oh.
There
Oh,
are a
2D.
few people out there who don't deserve to die like that. They need help.
Okay.
They deserve it.
All right.
Yes, buongiorno, signore e signori.
Oh, okay. Oh. I mean, hey, there's things to talk about. That's an immediate benefit. I could definitely tell this is a little lower grade than the other one.
I think I've always lived life the exact
But they're
same
still
way.
holding on to it.
But others tell me I'm the quintessential Syracusan.
Well, simple, effective. I do have things to talk about, so let's get over to the breakdown. Alright, so the first thing I want to talk about here is something super simple, but I like talking about water, fluid, physics, stuff like this, simulations, that when they're done well, they're done extremely well. This wine was done immaculately well. You can see all of this color, all of this stylistic flair thrown into it. The physics of the water itself, wine itself, are very well done. The way that it flows into the glass is very realistic, and I like how it feels. You can tell this entire shot is pretty much CG. The background could be a 2D drawing, most likely is. I'm not entirely sure if the glass is, and then they ended up just making a mock of it in a 3D program and making it invisible just to use the shape of the glass. They could have done it in CG and just made it look this way with some fancy room lighting effects. It can be done a number of ways. It's kind of hard to know for sure unless you are in the kitchen making the food. So with this one, I'm pretty sure that the liquid is CG, just due to the way that the liquid here has depth on the way that it kind of bows around and cups in the center. I believe so. I could be wrong. It could be animated in 2D, but that would be an immaculate 2D drawing, so I assume that it's a 3D with maybe some 2D effects drawn afterwards, some rim light added for that extra effect, get that lighting in there. The bottle is pretty clearly CG, just due to the way that it rotates on the screen, so I figure that the liquid is as well. Either way, great shot. Great fluid dynamics, like the way it feels, solid. The other shot I really like is right here with how the paper gets kind of lifted and it follows real physics here. This is another great shot of physics in this animation being done extraordinarily well. A lot of people get stuff like this wrong. The pressure that exists underneath paper is very strong. For those of you who may have had this experiment in your schools, in science class and such, there is an experiment where you can put a piece of paper over the top of a ruler that's hanging half off of a table, and you can hit it really hard and it won't move, but if you lightly tap it down, it will move. That's just displaying how air pressure works, because paper is a wide surface and it's hard for air to get underneath there, especially if it's done very quickly. The air doesn't really have enough time to move the paper, so it just stays put. Physics-wise, they didn't have to do this amount of work to make this shot happen, but somebody decided to look up some reference of how paper moved and utilized that in order to get this bubbling underneath the center where the air kind of cups it up and makes it bow near the edge and kind of scoop under. It's super small, Detail that didn't need to be there, but I'm glad it was because it's how it should be. Another highlight real quick here, this explosion on this car is just immaculate. I've talked about impact frames a lot in this channel because I love bringing them up, and this is a great one. You see this color highlight. This is a fantastic little bit of detail here. The fact that they left where this street lamp was illuminating as the one and only spot on the street that is now a different color in the impact is really clever. And of course you get the other expected things like the pure white impact frame, at least in the area of effect. I like that it takes care to attend to all of this background stuff because the light would be affecting it, and then we're back to normal. It has kind of this shaky camera effect to it that's pretty common on these explosions, makes them feel more impactful, just a lot more energy to it. All in all, very good. It's also hard to know for sure if this was done in CG or 2D. I just tried giving it a closer look, but I really can't fully tell. It feels 2D, but it could just be a similarly shaded CG explosion. The depth seems very well done, so it could be CG, most likely is. But if this was 2D, I would not be surprised either, because some people take their explosion animations very seriously. Effects animation is an entire job in and of itself, and those who are professionals in it take vast care of their work. So we finally got into this spot where I'm going to kind of dig in a little bit and give a criticism here. This is a physics thing. This is something that I personally care about a lot, is getting physics correct. It's something that not everybody has the time to do or the focus to get done, and a lot of the times it can be fudged a little bit without it making too much fuss. Like this shot, it's not too bad, but I still noticed it, so it's worth mentioning. This bullet casing does not follow the proper arc in physics. If you don't know what arcs are, it's a principle of animation that basically says anything and everything should have an arc. It should exist within a bounds of making it some sort of an arc. Doesn't matter what shape, doesn't matter how far. Everything makes an arc because circles are very organic and natural in movement. Every piece of your body does that. My arm just did it right there when I did that. I curved in. You can see it everywhere you go if you really pay attention. Nothing moves in a straight line that isn't purely mechanical. This moves way too linear. It goes down too far. It bounces poorly and then just kind of hovers in the air and then falls too quick. That's another thing with it. Weight, gravity is another constant thing for physics that can be very hard to get to, especially if you're hand animating it. Likely this was hand animated, at least hand splined, which means just point to point. It was just set, add a curve between them and kind of let the computer figure itself out. And the final one was just a little too fast for the rest of the shot because you see it kind of pop out, pop, and then drop right there. It just kind of, it hits a little too quick. It bounces a little too quick. You could say, well, it's just bouncing. The speed is ramping back up, but that's not what the shot is doing. And there's nothing else in the shot to assist the idea of the speed ramping up again. So it was just a poor choice if that was the goal. All things considered, this was all right. This little kind of toss down here, but the second it landed and kind of popped up like that, and then it went back down way too quick right there in like half the time. Just not exactly what you should have done. It should have stayed just the same speed as the prior one, despite it going up a little bit less on that recoil from the bounce. It is, like I said, very small, but it is important because the eye feel is wrong. I also wanted to give this another shot. I don't think there's much to talk about here, but I wanted to see specifically in each frame where they did their shadows, where they placed them on the face, and I want to see some of the more interesting changes that happen on it. Like this one. That's almost an impact frame. That's really cool to have that there. It's so rapid. It goes straight through, but they really do mess with this sort of thing. You could see that now if you slow it down and look at it frame by frame, that this is a different color from this. They highlight things like the eyes. They make those red almost. It's very clever. It's a good stylistic punch. It's almost an impact frame in and of itself because of that sort of detail. And then they desaturate it, they bring it back in, they put some more blues in there. It's very visually interesting, and I know that obviously they did that on purpose. It was just delicious. This sort of thing is what makes a visual artist, seeing these sort of moments that can be utilized to add some more visual interest and impact to a frame, even if there's really no need to have those changes in there. It adds something. It makes your brain go, oh, for a second there. It kind of brings you back from the cusp of maybe boredom or visual fatigue, anything like that. These sorts of decisions are very, very smart, and it looks great. Every frame in here is a painting. Gorgeous. And here's an example where broken physics can make sense because they're in a big, huge fight sequence. It's kind of expected that things aren't going to be exactly to our personal experience in the real world of how physics go. This one where she kind of just zoops right up to the camera, that's extraordinarily fast, wouldn't be happening in our world. But using 3 frames to get there shows speed, and you can see her pose land on that third one, so there is still movement. There is a secondary movement, a counteractive balance to that mental state of why is she going forward so quick? You know, like just in a straight line, because like I said, straight lines aren't necessarily natural, and everything has slight curves to it, unless it's mechanical. But in a case like this where she's fighting, it makes sense to have that mechanical feel because she's a warrior, she's heavily trained, and this world, of course, isn't our world. So you can kind of admit the fudge when you're seeing stuff like this in fights because humans don't move that way, whereas something like a bullet casing earlier exists in both worlds and wouldn't be affected by gravity any other way regardless. It's again being picky, but this is a case where being picky doesn't necessarily have any weight, no pun intended. This is a beautiful shot, very well executed, very well framed. You have all these characters on these precise little points. If you were to break this down into 6 squares, I actually talked about this last time on my prior video on Il Siracusano, where it was I believe the event teaser. They had a similar shot where everything was perfectly framed and matched to that 6-set grid. So I'll turn off the timer on this so you can kind of see more what I mean. But if I were to run lines from here to here, cross them over like this, you can see that she's over this line, she's over this line, and even this here is right in the dead center. You can split that up to make a better grid, and that's just dead center right on that line. It's a perfect center. And of course, visually, that makes sense. You're trying to split up these 2 characters by having something in between them. It's a good symbolism, and it fits very well in the context of the shot. And of course, as a Makoto Shinkai fanboy, this shot of this rain falling is very reminiscent to me of some of his earlier films. It feels very good. There's a lot of attention to the flecks that are coming off of this raindrop, and it is just gorgeous. When you can animate water well, you can animate basically anything well. It is one of the hardest things that is in the organic world to get correctly right next to fire. So yeah, that's basically it. I know this was a shorter one due to my aforementioned scheduling issues, but I'll be back to my normal length ones that are about 20 to 30 minutes long as soon as possible. I hope you had learned something despite the length of this one. I hope something stood out as an interesting piece of information. And yeah, basically it. Thank you all so very much for watching. I hope to see you in the next video. Goodbye!